Hi there. So thanks for coming to my channel, Software Test Automation for Eternity. So in this channel, we're going to cover various topics in software testing. Mainly, we're going to cover software test automation framework and tools. But I felt that we like to cover the software testing fundamentals as well. So me being a SDET or the automation engineer for more than a decade, I feel that the understanding the software testing fundamental is very, very useful for me to provide this test automation framework and tooling as for the team. So that's why I like to cover this series of software testing fundamentals using the interview questions. So the last time in part one, we talked about assumptions. So why is it hard to catch? Because it's kind of the human nature, and also why is it critical to call that out, and knowing those assumptions are important. So if you want to know more details about assumption in software testing, I recommend you go to the part one of the video and you can check that out. Okay, so today we're gonna cover part two. I said understanding the context. So I think this is one of the most important part. I really like this session. So let's dive into it. Okay. So understand the context. So basically, I call this the most critical piece of software testing in early days, I guess, for the most part. And then the automation framework design. It just don't understand the context. The software that you're testing is just a critical piece of it, right? So what kind of software that I'm testing, what kind of modules I'm testing. Just get a good context, understanding of the context of the problem is just super critical, right? So I'll say the key aspects of software I'm testing, right? So it could be a technology, it could be the user scenarios, all this context around the software you're testing. So even if you're testing a web page or web application, uh, what your software will be different from what Gmail is, what YouTube is, or what the Amazon shopping cart is, right? So when it comes to this understanding the context, it's just understanding all these aspects around the software you're testing, right? So it may be a bit different from the best practice we're talking about for the most part, right? So you need to have test strategy, test plan, test case, and things like that. But when it comes to effectiveness or the true sort of testing strategy, coming up with some most effective test strategy, I think having that good understanding of context actually is critical. So I'm not against the best practices, but instead of just set up sort of criteria and trying to fitting into what your software is, but it's more important for you to understand the context in general. So there's the software, people, their key piece of the feature, and testing availability, like all these aspects. And so understanding this context is pretty important for this part. And then it comes with the dealing with the ambiguity, right? So it comes with it's the product, and we need to specify what level of testing is required, what kind of feature is there. So dealing with the ambiguity is pretty important. And then that it comes out, and then it actually defines the test scope that you're going to have. I mean, James Bach, yeah, another yes. I mentioned that on last video as well, but he's my favorite test engineers in this industry. And he mentioned about context-driven testing. Like, yeah, there is, like, behavior-driven testing or test-driven testing, or I guess uh, you know risk-based testing, and he used the context-driven testing as a term. I don't know that this term was existed before, but basically the idea is it's really hard to find the best practice for testing, but it is good to understand, just coming up, understand the context, understand the key aspects of software or the feature that you're testing, and coming up with the most appropriate testing strategy is the best way to test this thing. I think that's the James Box intention of this context-driven testing. But I really liked it, and I've been using it for context-driven testing. And it's very effective, and it's very useful, and then it kind of makes sense for development team and project team and business understand why and how we're testing based on the context. And yeah, definitely that'll kind of lead you your testing strategy, right? So let's kind of go through the questions. So well, how would you test this, right? So first one, how would you test a large-scale e-commerce website, or how would you test self-driving car, or how would you test a Google search, right? So, well, this one is an interview question that tests your dealing with ambiguity, and then how you kind of when someone just throw this big question and it's not very specific, and then they want you to sort of think about how you're going to go about testing this and scope it and things like that. So the first reaction, so I just choose an example. How would you test Google search feature? And I guess your first reaction has to be, what the hell, right? So it just, you throw me a huge sort of feature thing like Google search feature is a huge thing, and what do you want me to answer, right? So basically what this kind of question asks you is, how do you deal with the ambiguity, right? So this is such a big concept, or just ambiguous concept. How's you going to go about testing, right? So okay, so then the expectation for this one is you're defining the context around this problem. Google search, what Google search? Are you talking about the Google search in search results, or the display, or this auto-generated, recommended list? Or so you kind of going understand the context of it, and then you go like, oh, okay, what about are you talking about this different browser compatibility related to this, or you're talking about mobile versus browser and things like this. You want to scope it down and then understand what specific feature do you want, right? So it is about, is it about specific keywords, or is the phrases? So at the beginning, when someone, so like interviewer, throw this vague question, you want to define and you want to understand the context, and you want to get deep dive into the getting into the what specific things you want, and then you kind of wanted to answer that question. So instead of you coming up with a lot of test cases at the beginning, there's a Google search, and I'm gonna type this and that, and it's a bunch of sort of different kind of inputs. Well, that comes with a lot of assumption as well. But what this question is normally is about: can you define? Can try to understand the context of the problem? Can you scope it? Can you deal with the ambiguity? And then can you understand what's going on inside internally and to support this particular feature? So that's basically it. And then context, I think it's really important, and I think there was some videos about context driven testing. I just put that in the put the link in the description. But yeah, so that was basically the topic, and hope you yeah, so that that was it. So thank you and have a nice day. Bye.